Chosen one, the days of struggle are over. God is stepping in to provide everything you need. You've labored long and hard, fought battles that seemed endless, and faced struggles that made you question how much longer you could keep going. But now, God is stepping in with a divine provision that will change your life forever. You won't need to work the same way again. He is about to meet your needs in ways you never thought possible. Your days of grinding are coming to an end, and God's blessings will sustain you from now on. Are you ready to embrace the freedom that's about to unfold? For so long, you've worked tirelessly. You've sacrificed, you've pushed through the exhaustion, and you've trusted in God's plan, even when it felt like nothing was working out. But now, the time has come for something radically different. The days of endless struggle, of feeling like you're always running out of time and energy, are over. God is about to change the way you live, and He's going to provide for you in ways that you never imagined possible. The truth is, you've been chosen for a new path, one where God Himself will meet your needs. In this video, you will discover the deeper reasons behind why God is freeing you from traditional work. We'll explore how God's divine provision works specifically for chosen ones like you, and what steps you can take to align with this blessing. This is your time to step into a season of abundance, peace, and trust, where you no longer have to fight the old battles. God's blessings are abundant, and they are meant for you. The breakthrough you've been waiting for is here, and it's time to walk in that freedom. If you're ready to see how God will provide for you, comment 77 to affirm that you're ready for this new season of provision. Why God is freeing you from work. You may wonder, chosen one, why God is freeing you from the traditional struggles of work. Why does He want to provide for you in ways that seem so different from the path the world expects you to take? After all, we've been taught from a young age that success is determined by the hours we work, the achievements we accumulate, and the effort we put into securing our future. So, when you hear the idea that God is removing you from the grind of traditional work, it might sound too good to be true, or even hard to accept. But what if I told you that this divine provision is not just about giving you comfort, but about setting you free to fulfill your true purpose? The answer lies in understanding the deeper, spiritual purpose behind this blessing. You see, God's provision is not simply about making life easier or giving you what you think you need in the moment. It's about positioning you for something greater. Something far beyond the narrow definitions of success that the world imposes on us. God is freeing you from the limitations of this world's economy, so that you can align more fully with His divine economy, which operates in ways that far exceed human understanding. The world measures success by how much you work, how many hours you put in, and how much you can accumulate through your own efforts. We've all been conditioned to believe that the harder we work, the more we deserve, and the more we earn, the more successful we become. But God's kingdom operates according to an entirely different set of principles. God's economy is not based on human effort or striving. It's based on trust, surrender, and divine provision. When you align yourself with His will, when you trust it has a purpose for you that is greater than anything you could achieve on your own, God steps in and provides in supernatural ways. Take the story of the Israelites as they wandered in the wilderness. For example, after being freed from slavery in Egypt, they found themselves in the barren desert, facing hardships they never could have anticipated. The conditions were harsh, resources were scarce, and they had no means of survival. But God's provision was evident at every turn. He sent manna from heaven to feed them each day, and He ensured that their needs were met despite their circumstances. The Israelites didn't need to work for their food. They didn't have to toil the land, plant seeds, or worry about running out of supplies. God did the work for them, providing them with what they needed day by day. For 40 years, the Israelites were sustained by God's provision. They were in a place where human effort could not provide for them. Yet, in the midst of their struggle, God showed them that He was their true provider. They didn't need to rely on their own labor to survive. They needed to trust in God's ability to meet their needs. This wasn't just a random miracle. It was a divine sign of God's care, faithfulness, and provision. It was a reminder that when we trust in Him fully, we step out of the world's system of earning and striving and into a higher way of living. Now, you may be asking, how does this apply to me? Why is God freeing me from the need to work as I once did? The truth is, Chosen one, this divine care and provision that was extended to the Israelites is now being offered to you. You are being freed from the constant pressure to rely on traditional work as your primary source of income or sustenance. And this is not a coincidence. It is part of God's plan to elevate you to a higher purpose. You are not meant to live under the constant weight of financial pressure, exhaustion, and anxiety about securing your future. God is showing you that your ultimate provider is not your job, your boss, or your own ability to hustle. Your provision comes from Him, and He is more than capable of meeting your needs in ways you cannot even predict. This season of freedom is not just about taking a break from the world's hustle. It's about recognizing that God has called you to something far greater than simply working to survive. He is removing the barriers that keep you trapped in a cycle of striving and struggling, and He is opening the door to a life of abundance and peace. The more you embrace this new season, the more you will realize that this freedom is part of God's divine plan to elevate you. It's about stepping into the fullness of who you are, who God has always intended for you to be. God's plan for you is not limited by the world's standards of success. He is inviting you into a higher way of living, where you trust Him to provide, where you rely on His abundance, and where you step into your true purpose. This freedom is not just about escaping the rat race. It's about aligning yourself with God's divine timing and purpose for your life. It's about shifting your focus from trying to meet your own needs to trusting that God will take care of you, so you can focus on fulfilling the greater mission He has set before you. Just like the Israelites, who were freed from the chains of slavery in Egypt and set on a journey toward the Promised Land, you are being freed from the bondage of the world system of work and success. God is calling you to walk in a new kind of freedom, freedom from worry, fear, and exhaustion, freedom to trust that He will always provide for you, just as He did for the Israelites in the wilderness. When you embrace this truth, you will no longer be bound by the constraints of worldly expectations. You will walk with the confidence of knowing that your provision is in God's hands, and He'll provide for you in ways that go beyond what you can imagine. This divine freedom is not about being lazy or passive. It is about learning to trust God more deeply, to live in alignment with His will, and to step into the purpose He has for you. When you embrace this freedom, you will find that your heart and mind are no longer consumed with the struggle for survival. Instead, you will be able to focus on the higher calling God has placed on your life. You will have the space, the energy, and the clarity to fulfill your divine mission, knowing that God is with you every step of the way. As you move forward into the season of divine provision, remember that this is just the beginning. God is freeing you not just from the physical act of working, but from a mindset that keeps you trapped in the cycle of struggle. You are being called into a new season of purpose, abundance, and divine alignment. This is your moment to embrace God's provision, to trust that He is your ultimate provider, and to walk in the freedom He has promised. Comment freedom. If you understand that God is freeing you to live in a way that aligns with His will and His abundant provision, stay tuned, because in the next section, we'll dive into how God's provision works specifically for chosen ones like you. This journey is just beginning, and the best is yet to come. Understanding God's provision. God's provision is something far greater than just meeting your immediate material needs. It is not merely about giving you enough to get by. No, it is about aligning every aspect of your life with His divine will. God doesn't just provide the minimum to help you survive. When He steps and provides for you, He gives you everything you need to thrive, to fulfill your divine purpose, and to live in the fullness of His abundance. The truth is, God's provision is a manifestation of His love for you, a reflection of His desire to see you flourish and walk in your true destiny. So, what does it really mean when God provides for you? It means that He doesn't just meet you at your lowest point. He doesn't simply give you what you need to scrape by. No, He takes you from survival mode into a life of purpose and abundance, where everything you do aligns with His higher plan for you. God's provision isn't limited to just one area of your life. It's expansive. It touches your finances, your relationships, your health, your emotional well-being, and your spiritual growth. When you truly trust God with your life, you open yourself to experience the fullness of what is planned for you. Think of the story of Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. During a time of drought and famine, God instructed Elijah to go to a widow who was struggling to survive. When Elijah arrived, the widow was preparing her last meal for herself and her son, as there was not enough food to last any longer. But Elijah asked her to give him food first, and she trusted God's word through him. This simple act of trust, of obedience, changed everything for her. Because of her faith, God miraculously provided for her and her son. For the entire famine, her jar of flour and her jug of oil never ran out. Despite the apparent lack of resources, God sustained them in a way that defied all logic and human understanding. This story is an illustration of God's provision at work. It wasn't just about providing for the widow's immediate need. It was about giving her the means to live through a long period of hardship, to survive a time when survival seemed impossible. God's provision in her life was supernatural and unexpected. It defied her understanding of what was possible, but it came because she trusted God and gave what little she had. This wasn't a random act of generosity. It was a divine act of care, a sign that when we trust God fully, He provides in ways we cannot fathom. In your life, chosen one, God's provision works the same way. You may not always see it coming. You may not fully understand how it's going to happen or how it will all work out. But when you trust in God's plan, when you release the need to control everything, God will provide for you in ways that surpass all human expectation. His provision is not confined to your bank account or your material needs. It stretches into every area of your life, your health, your relationships, your peace of mind, and your emotional and spiritual well-being. This provision isn't something that comes from your own efforts. It's not about how hard you work or how much you hustle. It's about relying on God's power, His ability to provide in ways you cannot imagine, and His desire to bless you beyond what you could ever ask for or think. When you fully embrace this truth, you start living from a place of abundance, knowing that everything you need is already being taken care of by a loving and powerful God. Your provision doesn't depend on the limits of your own ability. It depends on God's limitless capacity to supply every need. Think about how much effort you put into trying to control every aspect of your life, how often you try to figure out how to make things work, how to manage every detail, and how to make sure that you're not left without. Now, imagine stepping back and letting God take the lead. Imagine fully trusting that He is your provider, that He will give you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. When you let go of your need to control the outcomes and trust that God is working on your behalf, something profound happens. You stop striving in your own strength, and you begin to live in alignment with His will. You begin to step into a new reality where you trust that all your needs will be met in ways that are not bound by your own limited understanding. This doesn't mean that everything will be easy or that you will have everything you want right away, but it does mean that God will meet your needs in ways that will surprise you, in ways that will stretch your faith and allow you to experience His provision in ways you never imagined possible. There's a peace that comes with trusting God for your provision. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that isn't shaken by the uncertainties of life. When you trust in God's provision, you're no longer living in fear of scarcity. You're living with a certainty that God will always provide what you need to fulfill the purpose He has set before you. This is not just a spiritual concept. It's a practical truth that will manifest in every area of your life. Whether it's finances, health, relationships, or emotional well-being, when you trust in God, His provision will begin to flow in ways that are supernatural and beyond your comprehension. As you embrace this truth, you will start to see the world differently. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who is barely making ends meet, you will see yourself as a child of God, fully provided for and capable of fulfilling the purpose He has called you to. You will no longer be bound by the limitations of the world's economy or the struggle to secure your own future. Instead, you will walk with confidence, knowing that God has already laid out the provision you need to fulfill your divine purpose. When you live in alignment with God's provision, you step into a life of abundance and peace. This doesn't mean that life will be without challenges, but it does mean that you will face those challenges with the confidence that God has already equipped you to overcome them. You will trust that God will meet your needs in every area of your life, and you will experience the fullness of His provision in ways you can't yet see, but will soon understand. Comment trust. If you're ready to step into the fullness of God's provision for your life, stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore how to recognize the blessings God is already providing for you. These blessings are here, they're tangible, and they're meant to fuel you as you walk boldly into the next season of your divine journey. Stay tuned, because there's so much more to discover as we align ourselves with God's abundant provision. By now, you've learned that God's provision is about more than just material blessings. It's about aligning your entire life with His will. But how do you begin to recognize the blessings that God is already providing for you? How can you see the ways that God is working on your behalf, even when things may not seem immediately obvious? Stick around, because we're about to uncover how to recognize the abundant blessings God is already pouring into your life. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to subscribe, share with others who need this message, and click the super thanks button to support this channel. Let's continue to explore how God is actively working in your life to bring provision and abundance. Recognizing the blessings in your life. Recognizing God's provision is not always an easy task. It's one thing to hear about it, but it's another to truly see and understand how it operates in your life. The truth is, God doesn't always provide in the ways we expect. You may have imagined that His blessings would come through a direct financial miracle or an instant solution to your struggles. But God's provision is often far more subtle, and it frequently comes in unexpected ways. It's not always a windfall of money or a dramatic change in circumstances. Sometimes it's the small, everyday miracles, things that seem insignificant at first, but when seen with the eyes of faith, reveal the depth of God's care and timing. Consider how often we overlook the blessings that come in quiet, unnoticed forms. God doesn't always show up in ways that fit into our predefined notions of provision. This is something that many chosen ones struggle with. We live in a world that pushes us to value what can be seen, touched, and counted, what fits into the limits of human understanding. But God's blessings often work differently. They often unfold in the background, in the unseen moments that we fail to notice because they don't fit the mold of what we think provision should look like. Take the story of the widow's oil in 2 Kings 4. During a time of famine, when resources were scarce and hope was running thin, the widow was given an instruction that seemed impossible. Use a little oil she had to fill as many jars as possible. The widow, struggling with the reality of a meager existence and no way to provide for her children, had no idea that God was about to multiply what seemed like an insignificant amount of oil. Yet, when she followed the prophet's instructions, the oil didn't run out. Each jar she filled overflowed with oil until there were no more jars to fill. This story is a profound example of how God's provision often works. It didn't look grand at first. The widow's oil was tiny and seemed worthless, especially in the context of a famine. But when she stepped out in faith and obedience, God transformed her small offering into a miraculous blessing. The oil, which she thought would run out immediately, multiplied. Her act of trust allowed God's provision to multiply in ways she could never have predicted. In much the same way, your life is filled with blessings that may seem small at first, yet they are the foundations of something much greater. God often provides in ways that require you to take that first step of faith, whether it's a small offering of trust, a moment of surrender, or the willingness to obey even when things don't make sense. The moment you act in faith, stepping out of your comfort zone and trusting that God will meet you where you are, you will begin to see the blessings unfold. It's often in those moments of faith that the miraculous happens, even if it seems insignificant or unimportant at first glance. Start looking around you. Look at your life with fresh eyes. Can you see how God has been providing for you, even in ways you didn't expect? Maybe it's in the form of a friend who showed up just when you needed them, or a stranger who offered you words of encouragement at the perfect moment. It might be an opportunity that came at the last minute, when you thought everything was lost, or the peace that descended upon you during a time of emotional turmoil, when everything seemed to be falling apart. These are signs of God's provision, His way of showing you that He is always working on your behalf, even when you don't see it. It's important to understand that God's provision is not limited to your finances. It encompasses every area of your life, your emotional well-being, your relationships, your mental state, and your spiritual growth. Sometimes, the blessing isn't in a material form. It's in the peace you find when everything else around you feels chaotic. It's in the joy you feel when you experience God's love in unexpected moments. It's in the healing you receive from emotional wounds, or the clarity you find in moments of uncertainty. Think of the times in your life when you felt at your lowest, when you thought you couldn't go on, and yet somehow you made it through. You might not have been able to see it then, but God's provision was at work in those moments, carrying you through when you felt like giving up. Those quiet moments of peace, the unexplainable sense of comfort in the middle of your struggle, those are all signs of God's provision. The challenge is to recognize them, to open your eyes to the subtle ways that God has been working behind the scenes, preparing the way for your victory. When you begin to recognize these blessings, you realize that God is constantly providing, constantly working to meet your needs. But the key to recognizing His provision is in changing your perspective. Instead of seeing scarcity, see abundance. Instead of focusing on what's lacking, focus on what's already been provided. The more you begin to notice the small miracles, the quiet blessings, the more you'll see how God's hand has been in every detail of your life. For example, have you ever thought about the simple act of waking up every morning? The breath in your lungs, the strength in your body to get through another day. These are all gifts from God. They are often overlooked, but they are signs of His ongoing provision in your life. The fact that you're here today, still fighting, still pushing forward, is a testament to the fact that God has provided the strength and resilience you need to face each day. When you begin to recognize these blessings, you start to see just how much God is already doing in your life. He is working in ways you cannot always understand, but He is faithful. His provision is abundant, and it is constantly being poured out over you. Recognizing God's provision is not always about waiting for a dramatic miracle or a massive change. It's about seeing the everyday miracles, the moments of peace, the little victories, the signs of love and grace that appear when you least expect them. These blessings are always around you, always working in your favor, but it's up to you to open your eyes and see them for what they truly are. Comment blessed if you're starting to see how God's provision is already unfolding in your life. Living in freedom without fear, living in the freedom of God's provision, is not simply about the absence of struggle. It is about the deep peace and security that comes when you release your anxieties and trust fully in God's ability to provide. For so long, you've carried the weight of responsibility on your shoulders, believing that your survival and success were solely up to you. You've worked tirelessly, striving to secure your future, battling fear and doubt, and always worrying about what's coming next. But now, God is calling you to live in a different way. He is calling you to trust His provision, to let go of the fears and uncertainties that have held you captive, and to embrace the freedom that comes with knowing that He will take care of everything you need. The world tells you that you must work harder, sacrifice more, and hustle relentlessly in order to survive and succeed. It teaches you to fear the unknown, to fear the future, and to believe that if you don't constantly control every aspect of your life, you will be left behind. But God's provision operates on a different principle. It's not about hustling or striving. It's about trusting. When you understand that God is your provider, that He holds a future in His hands, you can live with confidence, knowing that He has already prepared the way for you. This doesn't mean that life will be free of challenges. There will still be obstacles, difficulties, and moments of uncertainty. But when you live in the freedom of God's provision, you no longer have to face them with fear. You can walk in peace, knowing that whatever comes your way, God is in control. Consider the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. For 40 years, they wandered in a barren desert, facing hunger, thirst, and uncertainty. Yet, despite the harsh conditions, God provided for them every single day. He sent manna from heaven to feed them, and they didn't have to worry about where their next meal would come from. Each morning, the Israelites gathered their portion of food, trusting that God would provide again the next day. They didn't have to plan or prepare for the future. God took care of them daily, teaching them to rely on His provision and to trust Him for their needs. This daily provision was not just about food. It was about God teaching His people to live without fear. Every time they gathered the manna, they were reminded that God would take care of them, that He would provide for them day by day. They didn't need to fear the future because they knew that God had already made a way. This trust in God's provision allowed them to live in peace, free from the constant anxiety that comes with trying to control every detail of their lives. They learned to walk in freedom, knowing that God would always provide for their needs, no matter how difficult the circumstances. Comment peace if you're ready to embrace the freedom that comes with God's provision and the peace that comes from trusting Him fully. Stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore how to use your newfound freedom to serve a higher purpose. This is not just about living in peace for your own sake. God has set you free for a reason, and that reason is to fulfill the higher calling He has placed on your life. Stay tuned to learn how you can step into your purpose with confidence and grace. We've covered how God provides and how to live in peace, but there's still more to this breakthrough. The freedom you now experience has a purpose beyond just personal comfort. In the final section, we'll dive into how to use this newfound freedom to serve a higher purpose and fulfill the divine mission you were always meant to carry out, using your freedom for a higher purpose. The freedom that God provides is not just a blessing for you to enjoy in isolation. It is not meant for you to simply rest on your laurels or retreat into comfort. Instead, this freedom is given to you as a tool, one that is meant to empower you to fulfill a higher, divine purpose. God's provision is not about personal gain or satisfaction alone. It is about allowing you to live in alignment with His will, to step fully into the role He has set before you, and become a vessel through which His love and power can flow into the world. Many people think of freedom as an escape from the hardships of life, a way to avoid the difficulties of the world. But the freedom God offers is not about escaping. It's about rising above. It's about using the liberty you've received to do the work that God has specifically called you to do. The freedom you experience today isn't just for you. It's for the transformation of others, for the expansion of God's kingdom on earth, and for fulfillment of the divine plan that was set in motion long before you were born. The Bible offers many examples of people who were blessed with freedom, not for their own benefit alone, but for the greater good. Consider the story of Esther, a woman who, despite her humble beginnings and the difficult circumstances surrounding her, was placed in a position of power to save her people. When Esther was called upon to intercede for the Jews and save them from destruction, she was reluctant, hesitant, even afraid. But in the end, she recognized that her position, her newfound freedom, was not for personal gain. It was for a greater purpose. She stepped forward with courage, trusting that God had placed her in that position for such a time as this. Take a moment to reflect on how you can use God's provision to serve a higher purpose. Esther's story is a powerful reminder of how God uses our freedom to accomplish His divine will. Her freedom was not just about being spared from harm or living a life of luxury. It was about stepping into her divine calling and making a difference. When you are provided with the freedom that God gives, you are also given the responsibility to act on it, to use it for a higher purpose. The freedom you experience is not just a gift. It's an invitation to serve, to be a part of God's plan to bring change to the world. The same principle applies to your life. Chosen one, the freedom you now experience is a divine opportunity. You've been freed from the constraints that once held you back. Not so you can live in isolation, but so you can use your freedom to make a real difference. It's easy to think of your freedom as an end in itself, a way to escape life's pressures and responsibilities. But God's provision doesn't stop with your comfort. It goes beyond that, into the realm of divine purpose. Think about the way you've been provided for, whether it's through unexpected financial blessings, the people who have shown up to help you, or the peace that has entered your life despite external chaos. God has been setting you up for something greater. Now, He's calling you to use what you've been given, not for self-indulgence, but for something far more meaningful. This is your time to serve, to give, and to make an impact. God's provision is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. You are meant to use that gift to bring hope to others, to spread His love, and help change the world in the way He has called you to do. This is where many people falter. They receive the blessings, the freedom, the provision, and they hold on to it as if it's just for them. But true freedom in God's economy comes when we realize that everything we've been given is for a purpose that goes beyond our own desires. God's blessings are not for hoarding. They are meant to be shared. They are meant to flow through you and into the lives of others. Comment purpose. If you're ready to use your newfound freedom to fulfill God's divine mission for your life, this is not just about living for yourself. It's about living for something far greater. In the next section, we'll explore how to use this freedom, not just for yourself, but for the greater good. Stay with me, because your journey is just beginning, and the impact you're meant to make is far beyond what you could imagine. God has great things in store for you, And as you walk in His purpose, you will experience a level of fulfillment and joy that will transform your life and the lives of those around you. Chosen one, God has provided for you in ways that go beyond what you could have imagined. The struggle is over. The victory is yours. Now, it's time to walk boldly into the next chapter of your life, trusting that God will continue to provide for you every step of the way. If you're ready to embrace this new season, help me spread this message. Subscribe to the channel, share, like, and comment. I am chosen. The best is yet to come.